Hi, I'm Abdullah Samir, and I'm going to be reacting to my very first video that hit 1 million views. If you're new here, please hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of all my updates. I'm Abdullah Samir. One fine day in July 2015, I left Islam. What proceeded to happen was I had many conversations, one after another, explaining to people, my friends, my family, but especially my Muslim community, why I had left Islam. As these conversations kept happening, I noticed that I was explaining the same things over and over again. Everybody thought that it could save me. Everybody thought, I know what his problems are. I'm going to tell him how to fix his iman issues, his faith issues, and I'm going to fix it so he's going to become Muslim again. Even one of my friends, I met him, he's an Arabic teacher and he works in a masjid. He actually told me after we had a conversation, just pray with me. And I was like, but you know, I'm not sure. He's like, no, just do it. So I did my wudu. I went in the mosque and I prayed. And he was so happy, he thought I was Muslim again. But I went home and the things he told me, they weren't really sitting well, right? They weren't good explanations. I mean, they were good explanations, but they weren't correct. They didn't fix the Quran of its main problems. So, as I kept telling the same things over and over again, I decided to make a blog. My wife mentioned this to me, and at the beginning, I didn't think this was a good idea, but actually it was a great idea. Because what it meant was I didn't have to explain the same things over and over again. I could just tell someone, look at my blog, and then if you have any questions, we can discuss based on that. The thing is, the blog had a certain impact, but I really wanted to come on video because I know many people don't read. And it's another way of connecting with people. So I talked to some friends and people, and even some of my Muslim friends were telling me, you know, be careful of crazy people, right? Be careful of crazies that will want to hurt you or your family. Maybe you shouldn't come out on video, you know, just keep it to the blog, right? But I really wanted to do this. I wanted to reach the people who I couldn't connect with through the blog. So in August 2016, I decided to go out on my lunch break in the hot sun and without knowing how to make a video, without knowing the first thing, you know, no video editing, no microphone, no tripod, just holding the phone in my hands, like sweating in the sun. There was like a plane flying overhead. And I just made a video like that. It was pretty embarrassing when I look back at it compared to my new videos. It was authentic, it was sincere. And that's what people connect to, right? People are able to connect to you when you speak from your heart, like I'm doing now. So I uploaded my video, and if I remember correctly, it went sort of viral back then. I think like in the first month or something, it had like, I don't know, 60,000 views or something like that. Like even today, you know, with 20,000 plus subscribers, it's not easy to make a video to have that much impact. But for whatever reason, maybe because of like, you know, my involvement in the dawah, the fact that I converted to Sunni Islam from Ismailism, the fact that, like I said, I was speaking from the heart, from really deep within and telling my story, maybe that resonated with people. Now, 2 years later, I hit 1 million views on this video. Now, I am so thankful for that. You know, this is a major milestone. You know, most people never get to that point. And in fact, like none of my other videos went even close to that. So I'm grateful for that. And I really appreciate the fact that this actually resonated with people and connected with people. Now, what do I think of my video from 2 years ago? So what would I change? Well, first of all, in the video that I uploaded, I still agree with pretty much everything that I said. The only thing is in the last 2 years, I've learned a lot. Through my thousands of hours of discussing and debating with Muslims, with having discussions in real life, on the phone, I've actually come to appreciate that some arguments are stronger than others. One of the things I mentioned in the video, which was the fact that many of the stories in the Quran come from Jewish folktales, I don't use that argument anymore. It's still true, and I still do believe that many of these stories did come from Jewish folktales, but it's much harder and it's much more difficult for someone to actually prove this, to look into it, to dig into the historical analysis of the Bible, and so it's not a point that I make anymore, even though I do hold it to be true. And this was one of the first things that caused me to doubt the entire situation. One of the more powerful arguments that I've learned now is evolution. You see, I never studied evolution as a Muslim. I just didn't think it was true. I never studied science, period. And that's why a lot of the arguments in the Quran actually didn't bother me, right? Evolution to me now is a silver bullet against Islam. At least, like a straightforward literal reading of the stories in the Quran and Sunnah. Because Adam and Eve is not scientific. There was no Adam and Eve, right? My cat again. If Islam is true, why is it that everything in the Quran reflects the understanding of a 7th century man? I will clearly state that there's not one thing in the Quran that we know could not have been written by a man in the 7th century. It really includes everything that you would expect a 7th century man to write, and nothing that you would expect that he would not know. For example, the same argument that I made 2 years ago. The Quran talks about Allah holding up the skies from falling. Allah talks about how the sky is held up without any pillars that you can see. All of this language is indicative of a man who was writing this according to his understanding of the cosmos, not the creator of the glorious universe that we see right now. Do I believe there's a creator of the universe even? I actually don't think so. From what I can tell, we live in an empty, dead universe that was always there, either in a cycle of like birth and death, an infinite cycle, and it's just always been there. Or maybe there's something else and we just can't explain it or understand it. And that's what I said at the end of my video. Maybe there's a power or force that exists outside of the universe. If there is, there's no way to prove it, and it's meaningless to us. Because it's only meaningful if this force has a personality and communicates to us and sends us a book or guidance or talks to us in some way. But if it's just some power, some abstract force, it's meaningless to us human beings, right? Us evolved apes, right? It's meaningless. And so I wouldn't change that. The funny thing is at the end of the video, it just got cut off, right? Because again, this was the first time I didn't know what I was doing. I think I ran out of space on my phone. So the video just cut off and I couldn't even finish my thought. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do this whole thing again. It was like so difficult in the first place. But again, if you'd like to know more about some of my arguments, I encourage you to check out my blog at abdullahsamir.com/blog. I still hold true all of the arguments I've made, and I actually think that there's a better way that we can have these discussions now. Instead of looking for holes in the Quran, look at it a different way. What is it that actually proves the Quran is from God? Because the default position is that the Quran is not from God. It's written by a man, because that's what we would expect, right? If someone comes with a book and says, I wrote this book, or they say, God wrote this book, you would say, well, what's your evidence that God wrote this book or revealed this book, that you didn't write it? Because, of course, there's many people that claim that they didn't write books, but actually they did. There's many liars. There's many people, many frauds, many con artists. If a religion was truly from God, wouldn't we expect that the man bringing it wouldn't benefit from it? That's a red flag. Wouldn't we expect that this religion from God would contain some evidence, some extraordinary evidence from outside it? The embryology in the Quran, I thought that was a miracle. The fact that the Quran mentioned, I used to believe the Quran mentioned things that could not have been known, like the mountains as pegs. But the fact is, these things were mentioned by others much before Muhammad's time.
The knowledge implied by the Quranic verses was not available or discovered at the time of revelation, which is the 7th century. This is wrong. Let's take some of the so-called miracles. The sending down of iron. Allah says in the Quran in chapter 57 verse 25, and we sent down iron. Okay, the Quran says that it was sent down. And this is in line with some scientific understanding that iron ore can be found in meteorites that came from outer space. So it was sent down, literally. Oh, it's a miracle. Well, not really. It's only a miracle based upon your false assumption of history, thinking no one else knew. But the Egyptians knew 1400 years before Revelation, they would call iron Ba-en-Pet, iron from heaven. So the thing is, when someone who's a skeptic is looking at this, like, well, the claim that you made is not coherent or accurate because it's based on a false historical assumption. Other people did know.
The fact is, the Quran talks about the heavens and earth being joined, right? And people think this means a big bang. But no, there was no earth back then. The earth didn't exist until billions of years after the Big Bang. So the heavens and earth could never have been joined. The Quran talks about, in the same verse 21:30 that talks about the heavens and earth being joined, it says we made everything from water. Muslims say this is impressive, but the fact is, half of the verse is already wrong. You know, the Quran doesn't even try to claim that it's coming up with miracles or miraculous knowledge about science. These are just the things that the people at the time took for granted, and Muhammad just included them because that's what he thought was true. He was just accepting it for what it was. But we have, you know, quotes from people much before Muhammad's time that were claiming scientific knowledge without access to a divine being, and they were actually far more accurate than even what the Quran says. For example, Tales of Miletus in 600 BC talked about how everything came from water. How is it that Plato in 400 BC, which was 2,400 years ago, was able to describe the earth as a hanging ball? He says, if a man could soar high above the clouds, earth would resemble one of those balls which has leather coverings in 12 places and is decked with various colors, of which the colors used by painters on earth are in a manner samples. How is it that Islamic astronomy didn't develop until Ptolemy was translated into Arabic? Lucretius, 2,000 years ago, another philosopher, described the world as being created out of atoms, indivisible atoms. So here we have ancient scholars, you know, even Aristotle is known for his embryology work, who, without any influence from any divine being, came up with much more profound and accurate realizations about the world. So the Quran is not a book of science, as Zakir Naik would say, it's a book of signs. However, those signs are all pointing in the wrong place. Everything where you would expect some divine foresight, some divine inspiration, we don't find it. Instead, what we're finding is mistakes, misunderstandings, and then Muslim scholars have to come and save the Quran. The tafasir, the exegesis, you know, they have to come like 100, 500, 600, 700 years later and say, no, the Quran is not saying that the sun is going into the murky pool of water. It's saying it looks like that. And that's what happens with the tafasir. They come and they have to save the Quran from its own errors because the Quran is wrong, right? So for me, this is some of the stuff I've learned over the last few years. And I've learned that I'm ever more confident about my position that Islam is false. And that I am better off as a non-Muslim. I am better off as a kafir, as a murtad or whatever. Because why would I want to ascribe myself to a religion that's man-made, that gets some things right and some things wrong? And at the end of the day, we can decide for ourselves what's better rather than Muhammad and his arbitrary moral values that he gave us, you know, 1400 years ago, that may have made sense, some of them, and may not have made sense, that personally benefited him and his companions. Like, for example, muta, allowing his followers to make a contract to get a marriage for a fixed amount of time, say one night for $200. He allowed this. For example, allowing his men to sleep with the slaves. He allowed this. He benefited from this, right? It gave him, a willing army that would fight and would die for him, because they were promised some sort of sexual satisfaction in the next life. So all of these things, what do they show us? Right? They show us that Islam is man-made. I also mentioned that I'm going to make a video on Dhul Qarnayn, but there was no point. Since the masked Arab, he did such a good job on his video, so I had no need to make a video on that topic. Lastly, thank you to my patrons from the bottom of my heart for all your support and for helping me grow this channel into something much bigger and better. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for your support. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Take care. This is Abdullah Samir signing out.